All right, guys, welcome back to the David F. Haas podcast, episode 171. Every time I say those episode numbers, I'm like, holy cow, this is a lot of episodes for the very few subscribers that I have. But it's all part of the process, guys. And the process is what we're actually here for. But this has nothing to do with today's podcast. It just happened to be a thought that crossed into my mind. Today's podcast is about why we feel so sad over the holidays. Obviously, we just got through the holidays, and I'm sure many of you, much like myself, experienced little hits of sadness throughout the course of the holiday season. I started paying attention to it a little bit more because that's what I do. I observe emotions. I notice emotional triggers. And I started asking myself, well, what is this sadness all about? And as I asked that question, some of the answers began revealing to me very quickly. As soon as you, and this is what happens when you learn to listen to the universe, listen to God, once you start asking, you start receiving the answers in abundance. What I did was I put them all into a list that we could all go through here together so that next holiday season, you could come back to this podcast and re-listen to it, and you will have a greater awareness of why you're experiencing that sadness, which will allow you to lean into the sadness and let it go so that you can experience a more joyful holiday season. And unfortunately, I guess this podcast is really a little bit late because the holidays are over, but it will be a great tool. And it's also just a great tool of awareness that you can reflect back on about the things that you experienced over this holiday season. This is all about, why are we doing this all? It's all about having a greater understanding of why we are the way that we are, to create awareness around the programs and the protection mechanisms that the mind has put in place to protect us from feeling an emotional pain or emotional pain, so that we can confront that emotional pain, lean into it, feel it fully, so the mind no longer needs to protect us. This will lower the noise of the mind, get us connected to higher states of consciousness, which will get us connected to joy, abundance, love. All of the things that we want to feel comes from awareness about why we're feeling the way we are currently. And so this is the purpose of this podcast. So it's there's 8 items, maybe 9 items on this list. The last one's really good, so stick around for that. But let's get into it. Let's start talking about this list. So the first one that comes up is, this is a big one, and it's going to be controversial, but the first reason that I tuned into that we experienced that, and this is really from my own experience, is that nobody cares about you. And now, obviously, this isn't the case. Of course, you have family and friends that care about you and love you, but this is not the kind of caring about you that I'm talking about. We have this egotistical belief that we are the center of the universe. We all have it. We're all kind of narcissists in that regard. But that was like a primitive part of us that was built into us for our own survival. And it was necessary. Of course, with spiritual awareness, we can then recognize that primitive part of us and begin removing ourselves from it so that we realize that it's not all about us. But there is still that little whisper that we wish it all was about us. And when we get around people in the holidays, what we recognize is that it's not all about us, and that no one really truly cares about us the way we care about us, which is obvious. But that little hit of, oh, these people actually don't care about me, is painful, and it creates that little hit of sadness, and it brings us back to, hey, this is all on my shoulders. This life, my happiness, my level of health, wealth, abundance, it's all on me, and that sucks because it would be a lot easier if there was other people that were going to help us along, and not that people don't help us, but it realistically comes down to the fact that it's all on us. And so it's a tiny little bit of victim energy that's in there. And that makes us feel sad. That makes us feel like nobody cares about us. And so that's one of the reasons we experience sadness. So leaning into that victim energy, leaning into the burden of having to do it all on your own, and recognizing that the people that you thought were supposed to care about you the most really don't care about you as much as you do. Like, it's all sad and heavy. And so you can just feel it as I walk you through it, of how terrible that all feels. And this gives us the opportunity to lean into this pain that we're normally avoiding, especially over the holidays. We're overeating and doing all these things to not feel emotions. And to be aware of them gives us an opportunity to feel so that we can lower the noise of the mind. We can remove this limitation. In this case, it's the victim energy. And the victim energy is a huge limitation because what we hold in mind tends to manifest. And if we are holding in mind that nothing ever goes our way and this life is hard and we can't catch a break, then that's exactly what's going to show up for us. So we want to undo that to lower that noise. And I think the other part to realize is that the way that you want to be cared about is really the only way I can describe it is like, who would you die for? And to me, like the people that I would die for would really just be my wife and my kids. And myself, of course. I mean, I would protect myself as well, but I guess you can't, who would you die for yourself? Doesn't make any sense. But I'd die for my wife and kids. I'd throw myself in front of a bus to save their lives. And that's the level of caring that you were really expecting from the rest of the world. And when you recognize that the rest of the world doesn't care about you like that, it's sad. Okay. The second one is comparison triggers. When you get together with friends and family that you haven't seen in a while, maybe they're doing better than you are. Maybe they got a new car. Maybe they got a promotion at work. And that reminds us about where we are or are not in our lives. And that comparison trigger makes us feel shitty about ourselves. And so then there's another hit of sadness. Now, how do you step out of this? Well, to recognize that the comparison is a tool that you have used to get yourself ahead. So when the mind notices other people doing better than you, it immediately starts talking to you a lot about how much better they're doing. It makes you feel like sad because you're not where those people are. And so then the mind tries to justify why you're not there. Maybe it puts them down. Maybe it says, oh yeah, they got all that money, but they don't have any time with their family, or whatever it does. It's all a tool to pull us out of the feeling that we are not good enough. When we can recognize that that's what we're avoiding, we can just lean into the feeling of not good enough, and then we can be happy for our friends and family because they've elevated their life in some way, shape, or form. But if you're not aware of that, then you might become like this miserable person over the holidays and slouch into a corner feeling sorry for yourself, and maybe even being mean to the people that are excelling in your life. We want to be in rooms where the people that are around us are like cheering for us. And when we recognize that they're not, like in number one, then that's when we feel sad. If you recognize that that sadness, that feeling shitty about yourself is showing up when people in your life are doing better than you, it's an opportunity to feel it, to feel the pain of not being good enough, lean into it so that you can then cheer for them, which is what they want, which is going to make you feel better about who you are as a person. And they're going to want to be around you more, and they're going to want to help you as well. So it's like this cycle. Okay, let's keep going. Overeating. This is another thing. It's, over the holidays, we eat like shit. We eat terribly. I ate like so much food, 23rd, 24th, 25th. And this morning when I woke up to come to work and do this podcast, I was like feeling sluggish, and all of that overeating affects our gut microbiome. It affects our mood. I'm reading this book right now called Good Energy, and it talks about how much eating poor, not a lot of food or overeating, spiking our insulin too much contributes to depression. So that's probably part of it as well. I think there's a physical element that we are eating more than we normally do, and it's causing us, there's even a feeling we feel bad about the amount of food that we're eating, so we're also getting down on ourselves, or feeling sad about how we're gonna have to do a whole bunch of extra work to lose this weight that we gained over the holidays. So that's one of them. Number 4 would be nostalgia combined with grief, and I think this is a big one because this is, for me, obviously both of my parents have passed, and when you get around the holiday season, even for me now having kids and watching them kind of go through the Christmas, it's bringing up memories for me about my childhood and Christmas, and how amazing my mom and dad were able to make Christmas for me up until my mom got sick, and then Christmas kind of all fell apart for me. The not having grandparents on my side for my kids to experience, my mom missing out on seeing my kids, me missing out on having her as a grandmother, who she would have been this amazing grandmother, which would have given us a ton of support. She was like that person for me, and my dad as well, actually, who would throw themselves in front of a bus to save me. And when you lose that, for me, there's a lot of grief that resurfaces during the holidays. I'm guessing that there are other people that are listening to this podcast that have lost loved ones that are also experiencing that grief. But again, it's another great opportunity. And this is why I say the sadness that you experience over the holidays is an amazing opportunity to feel, because most of the time we've suppressed all of that stuff down. And over the holidays, it all comes to the surface and we're like, oh, this is what sadness actually feels like. Because usually the mind does such a good job of making sure we don't feel sadness. So it's hard to connect to that pain. But over the holidays, it comes to the surface and you say, okay, here it is. Now, where do I feel it in the body? What does it actually feel like? Let me lean into it. Let me ask for all of it so I can show the mind that you don't have to protect me from this anymore. And why don't we want the mind to protect us from this anymore? It's because the protections that the mind puts up to protect us from feeling emotional pain are the greatest limitations in our life. A quick little example of that is I used to be a crazy people pleaser, and that was a protection from getting into conflict with other people, from not wanting people to dislike me. That protection ended up being a huge limitation, because if you're a yes man, or if you're always trying to, make sure everyone's happy, you're not going to get very far in life. And so it's a huge limitation that the mechanisms of the mind create. They end up being huge limitations for us. So this is why we're trying to undo all of this, so that we can lower the noise that the mind is constantly playing in the background, so that we can connect to who we really are. And that's one of the things I think that is most important about this work, is to recognize, and I said this in the last podcast, that we're just a collection of programs and protections that the mind put in place unconsciously. And to get back to who we truly are, get connected to our higher self that is connected to all, we have to undo all of those programs. And that's the purpose of why I continue to do this podcast and share the message, so that I can help people move along the path to undoing the ego, essentially. So yeah, that grief part is huge, and the nostalgia that comes along with Christmas is huge. Number 5 is becoming aware of how you're perceived by others, I think, is another one. I think noticing how people take you in, and sometimes realizing that they are not perceiving you the way you want to be perceived. They may perceive you as quiet, or, one of the ones that I get perceived as that I hate is like, I'm the guy with a sweet tooth. And as I'm always trying to make changes to my diet, and if I'm pulling back on sweets, oh, Dave, you're not eating sweets. You're not, oh yeah, no, Dave's got the sweet tooth. And I recognize that the perception of Dave is this guy that eats a bunch of sweets. And I don't like that perception of myself. The perception of me being serious is another perception that I do not like of myself. And recognizing that I have created those perceptions, and that also makes you kind of sad that people see you in that way when that's not who you really are. And that's another example of the programs that the mind has created, and how those programs are being perceived by the people in your life that you care about. Recognizing that there is a gap between who you really are and who you're being perceived. And when that comes to light, it might make you feel sad as well. Number 6 is financial pressure, which I think is another one that just kind of came to me. And this is not one really for me anymore, because I'm in a good financial place. But I remember over the holidays wondering how I was going to buy gifts for people. And that makes you feel like shit, for sure. And when you feel like you can't give to the people that you love, you can't give in the way that you want to, that will be a real wake-up call to how shitty your life is. And when you start to feel like your life is shitty, then for sure you're going to feel sadness. Number 7 is expectation. I think this is probably a huge one, is we have this expectation that this is the most wonderful time of the year. But then when we, when it doesn't deliver, when we feel this sadness that we're talking about here, when we're exhausted, when we've overeaten, when we recognize that people don't care about us, we then will increase the amount of sadness that we're experiencing, because we had this expectation that this is supposed to be the most wonderful time of the year. Recognizing that we put that expectation there in the first place, I think is huge, because then next year when we go into the Christmas holidays, we can go into it with no expectations. We can go into it just observing and letting it unfold the way it will unfold, and letting the emotions arise and noticing them and leaning into them so that we can break free from them. And then we let go of how this time of year is supposed to unfold. So letting go of expectations. Number 8, I think I'm on number 8, is seeing your family for who they really are. And this is one of the things I think that comes with spiritual growth, is it is very hard to have like surface level conversations anymore. And I've actually been leaning into having surface level conversations again, because that's one of the reasons I've become so serious, is because I don't really take a lot of joy in these like surface level conversations. And because of that, I just retreat and don't say much. People then perceive that as being serious. But what I've recently been doing is trying to find the joy in the surface level conversations again, which has actually been kind of fun. But when you start doing this work and you step out and you can see everybody's programs, you can see everybody for exactly who they are. That sometimes, especially if these people are the people that has raised us, is super depressing, because you recognize how those behaviors shaped who you are, and you recognize the challenges that you may need to overcome because of the way that you were raised or the environment that you grew up in. And this is all about the family field. A great deal of work that you have to do in moving up the scale of consciousness is undoing the family field. And like, you can just see it. It's like, just look at who your mother is, look at who her mother is. And then probably if you asked further back who your great grandmother was, you would see that the same pattern has been continuing over and over and over again. And I'm actually watching this series right now, Landman, and he has this really, really great line in it. And he says, the one thing that is inevitable is that the way you are raised is the way you will raise your kids. And I think that is true, but I think there is a subtle undoing all of the time. Like, for example, I was raised where money was very scarce, and I'm not raising my kids like that at all. I'm actually probably going the opposite way. So there tends to be this like the pendulum swings too far one way and swings too far the other way. Recognizing in all of this how your family field has shaped you and seeing everybody for who they are can sometimes be like depressing, because the magic of ignorance is no longer there. We can't just drink a bunch of beers and laugh the holiday season away because we see it all. And this has been happening for me with all kinds of everything, movies, entertainment, the needing to be entertained, the needing to experience, the needing to travel. It's like, I'm just removed from all of it because I don't need any of it. Recognizing that all of those things are trying to cultivate a feeling inside of you by getting something out there. And when you recognize that feeling that you're after can be cultivated from within, then there's no need to go and do those things anymore. Now you can still do them and you can still find joy in them, but your happiness no longer hinges on these experiences. Your happiness no longer hinges on other people. And stepping back from all of that, you can see how everybody is just trying to get. And when you take that step back, especially around the holidays, because you're seeing people that you don't normally see, and you're seeing them all together in the same room, you can see how everyone is just trying to get. They're trying to get the big laugh. They're trying to get the attention. And I guess you see, I think the depressing part about it is that not only can you see it in them and you're recognizing how that relates to your family field, but you also recognize how you were once that person and still are, and how there's still so much work to do can be depressing. I'm kind of stretching there a little bit, but that's what I'm basically picking up on. And then number 9, which I think is probably the most important, is over the holidays, you're forced to not do much. Right. And yeah, we're busy, we're running around, but there is a lot of time. And I was experiencing over the last couple of days here, just being at home with my kids and being in this downtime where, I'm not doing any work. I'm not busy with my day to day. The world kind of somewhat shuts down a little bit. And so there's just less to do. And in that forced stillness, we get reunited with all of the emotions and feelings that we have been unconsciously shoving down. And how have we been doing that? How have we been unconsciously shoving down? By keeping busy. You ask anybody, how are you doing? I'm busy. The whole entire world is so busy these days. And that busyness is a tool of protection. And when you take that busyness away, all of the stuff it was protecting you from boils up to the surface. And again, bringing this back to, this is why the sadness over the holidays is actually not a bad thing. It's a good thing, because it's finally opportunity to feel and removing yourself from the noise of day-to-day life is a very difficult thing to do. Like even in meditation, it's very difficult to do. Like if I sit my meditations out and I know I got a big day ahead of me, those meditations usually suck. But if I don't have much going on in the morning, I do my meditations at like 5 in the morning. If I don't have much going on in the morning, I just usually meditate, go to the gym. And if my first meeting, let's say, is not till noon or 1 or later in the afternoon, my meditations are usually way better. Most people aren't even meditating in the first place to try and remove themselves from that noise. So that means that they're not even aware of what it is that they're avoiding. And the holidays, again, creates this great gift because the world shuts down and we get reunited. And so I guess to wrap this whole thing up is, well, what do you do with all of this now that you become aware of it? If we go into next holiday season, you re-listen to this podcast and say, I got to prepare for the holidays. I got to listen to that podcast that Dave put out. What do you want to do with all of this? And I think the first thing is we want to notice. So when sadness shows up, usually the mind unconsciously goes to work to shove it back down, and it does so in a variety of ways. So there's two benefits that come here. The first one is if you can identify how the mind is suppressing or escaping, you can recognize that that's a pattern that you have been unconsciously using up until this point, and now you become conscious of it, and you can go, oh, that's why I'm going to the cookie jar, or that's why I'm going to the fridge. It's because I don't want to feel the sadness. Now with that awareness, we can say, okay, let me lean into the sadness. And this would be the second part. So the first part is you become aware of what you've been unconsciously doing to avoid. And now that it becomes conscious, it no longer can be unconscious. So when you open up the fridge and you're not hungry, you're always going to go, well, I'm doing it again. I'm avoiding something. And even with that awareness, you'll create change. But the second part is it allows us to feel what sadness actually feels like. And instead of resisting the sadness, this is like probably the hardest part of learning how to let go, is how to connect to the emotion, because the mind is saying, no, we're not going back there. We're not letting you in. But now the feeling is right here on the surface. And so now we can have the opportunity to fully feel it. And then we want to lean into it completely. So the holidays gives us an opportunity to feel fully. And if we don't resist, if we don't avoid, if we don't escape, that is an opportunity to let it go once and for all. And that's essentially what I did over the course of this holidays. As I noticed that sadness arise, instead of avoiding it or escaping it, I just let myself feel it. And sometimes I did it, when I was sitting right next to 30 other people. I just let the feeling come. Then they didn't have to know anything about it. Sometimes I did it in my meditations in the morning, and I recognized that the feeling was there, and I allowed myself to sink into it completely. And actually, that's partly the reason why this list was created, because I was like, what am I actually feeling, and why am I feeling these things? And these are the things that came to mind. And when we show the mind that we are okay in this sadness, the mind no longer needs to protect us from it. And the programs, the mechanisms, the survival patterns that it has created that are our biggest limitations will then melt away in an instant. And then the next holiday season, we won't experience sadness. Hopefully, we will be able to enjoy the holidays for whatever they bring and have total acceptance for all of our friends and all of our family that we're around. We're not going to compare. We're not going to, I don't want to say we're not going to overeat, because we're going to overeat over the holidays, but recognizing that overeating might be the source of some of this sadness. We're just going to be aware of it all, I guess, is what I'm trying to sum up here. We're going to be aware of all of it, and we're going to use it as an opportunity to heal. That's basically where I want to leave it. I hope you had a great holiday season. There's always an opportunity every single day to become aware of what is limiting us. And when I say what is limiting us, what do I mean by that? I'm not just talking about like abundance and financial wealth and happiness. I'm talking about what is limiting us from reconnecting to our higher selves, which is connected to all. That's where I want to be, right? And so I am trying to remove the clouds so that I can allow the sun that has always been there to shine on me. And you do that through the process of observing and healing and leaning into or letting go of the things that your mind is avoiding most. And if you can learn how to do that, you can rapidly move up the scale of consciousness. So I hope this podcast served you. I hope you had a great holiday season. If you liked it, like it. And if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. Don't forget to share it with somebody also. that maybe experienced a tough holiday season, because I think this will be really beneficial for them as well. As always, the purpose of my podcast is to give back. And if you have any questions, comments that you would like me to cover, if you would be open to being a live guest on my podcast to go through a live spiritual mentoring session / coaching session, hit me up, DM me, whatever that may be. I'd love to have you on the podcast to explore anything that you are struggling with, because in undoing your struggle, it'll help many other people as well. Thanks for taking the time to listen. See you next week.